Hi, everybody. It is good to have you here. I assume you can hear me right now. So welcome.
Hello, Hedera community. We'll give everyone just a few minutes to get online and join.
Okay. Yes, let's go.
We will.
We will. It is always fun to talk to you guys. I always enjoy these. Hello, future. Ah, yes. First. You know what kind of a huge reward you get for being first. Ireland. Hello from Ireland. Hello, Hong Kong. Hello, hey. Mumbai. Czech. Delaware. Canada, Germany, London. I love it. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tel Aviv. Another Oklahoma. Nebraska, Sydney. Brooklyn. Montana, Kenya. Hello, Kenya. Canada. Victoria. Lots from Canada today. Melbourne, New York, Fort Lauderdale, and my favorite, hello from the future. I cannot wait to see what the future holds. Wait, no spoilers, don't tell me, but it'll be fun to see. Indonesia, welcome. Narabri, I probably said that wrong, but great to have you.
Wow. It feels like every time we do this, we get people from more new places. I love it.
Yeah. England, Philippines, Montreal. I love it. Arlington, Texas. I've heard of Texas. That was a joke because we are in Texas right now. Our headquarters is in Texas, although Hedera has people spread all around the world. Puerto Rico, Serbia.
Club HBAR, is that like, yeah, I'm curious where that is located. Please let us know.
Is there a consensus algorithm to help my wife and me decide what movie to watch? Yes, watch what she wants. That's my advice. There is an algorithm to reach consensus.
All right. So we have a lot to get through today. I know we have folks still joining and I see those popping up. Please continue to share where you're from. Yes, both Leemon and Daryl, I appreciate the sentiment. Happy wife, happy life. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Just for those who have been with us a long time, welcome back. It's always good to be with you. For those who are new to these town halls, we try to do a few things. We try to get through as many of the questions that were posed to us throughout the month as we can. We also try to not repeat anything that was on a previous town hall or that is on the Hedera website or other information that's out there publicly, because we want to make sure that this is useful for folks who are always trying to learn something new about Hedera. So with that, we will go ahead and kick off. And the first question, Leemon, if Hedera was chosen as a CBDC technology, would the CBDC run on the mainnet or a private network?
It could be either way or something in between. So there's a lot of different choices. And I think for different countries, different types of CBDCs make sense. So the simplest thing is you run it on mainnet. Use one of our tokens. We have a token service. It runs at native layer speeds. It's integrated into exchanges. You just do that and you have all this instant stuff done for you. Very simple and very clean. Or you run a private network. And so you have this private network that's managing your coin, but of course, the most useful thing of a CBDC is that it can interoperate. And so then you have bridges. So you'd have a bridge from your private network to Hedera or to another network. And our consensus service is great for building bridges. You can build all sorts of bridges. Or you can do something in between, which has a lot of advantages. And that is where you build it as a private network whose consensus engine is Hedera. That's the consensus service. And so what you do is you build a bunch of computers and they are managing this thing. But for ultimate trust, you have all the transactions flowing through Hedera. And if you want to, you can encrypt them and you can do whatever logic you want. You can do whatever privacy you want. You can make the CBDC run whatever way you want to make it run. And there's a lot of advantages to that. And so you can use the whole ecosystem out there for building private networks, but then you use the plugin at the bottom of it to make all the transactions go through Hedera and you inherit the trust of Hedera. And so you have a wide range of options. So if you're doing a CBDC, you can do any of those three. If you're doing a token period, you can do any of those three. You have lots of options.
All right. Well, we're going to stick with the topic of CBDCs. Mance, how and when will Hedera support transaction privacy and account balance privacy? Both of these are very important, both for CBDCs as well as token use cases.
Yeah, actually, Leemon just addressed it. I mean, if you have a private network, well, then everything's private. If you have the hybrid that Leemon was describing, where you have an app net that's running it, which is a private network potentially, and it's running the ledger. The ledger is contained in the application network. The transactions that flow through the Hedera consensus service can be encrypted, presumably would be, and they don't come to rest on the mainnet. They just flow through and go back through to the application network. And the nodes in the application network are the ones that do the validation of the transactions and maintain the ledger and all of that. So the privacy and account balance and all of that is addressed directly in the application network using HCS.
Great, thanks, Mance. Okay, Leemon, can you talk a little bit about, and maybe we should just give a preface with what the HIP program is, and then about HIP 16.
Okay, so which is auto-renewal. Yes, so the HIP process is how the community is giving us advice, and I am really excited about that. So this has worked. We have HIPs now that we're implementing that started in one form. Maybe it was proposed by the community, maybe it was proposed by a person in Hedera, but then the community ended up giving all these inputs and ended up changing radically. And so all sorts of things have been that way. I think actually HIP 16 is a good example of something that started off in one form and ended up changing very much and looking very different. And this is for the auto-renewal thing. So let's talk about this. You do not have to be afraid that your account has suddenly disappeared and you've already deleted it and you're in trouble. It hasn't been turned on yet. When it is turned on, there will be a grace period of several months that will be added to all the accounts. So none of them will expire within this first few months. And then if you have an account with some HBARs in it, it will automatically renew itself every 3 months. And it's an extremely tiny price. You can go to the pricing calculator, but it's very, very small fraction I think it's a fraction of a cent. I think it's a very, very low price to auto-renew. So you will be able to see that your account auto-renews. If you have any HBARs at all in it, then you should be fine. And it'll just keep auto-renewing from those. And if you have something else like a smart contract, you might want to put some HBARs in its account so that it auto-renews. The plan is that you will be able to auto-renew automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. You'll be able to attach an account to it to have it auto-renew. You won't have to worry about it as long as you have some HBARs. And if you even put in $10 of HBARs, it'll last for many, many years before it runs out. So you're fine. In addition, if it does run out of money and fail to auto-renew, there'll be an expiration period where it's frozen. You can't do any transactions on it, but you can still recover it by paying for it. And so you don't lose everything. What you'll discover is, hey, my thing stopped working. And then you can refill it and redo it, and now it's working again. If you do, though, don't refill it for a while, then eventually it would actually be deleted. And you won't have lost any money because, of course, there were no HBARs in it. But it's still very inconvenient. So I would recommend not doing that. So keep a few HBARs in your account. And if you have something else like a smart contract, keep a few HBARs in it so it can auto-renew. Won't be an issue. It hasn't even been turned on yet. When it is turned on, everybody gets a few months of grace period immediately. And then at the end of that, it'll auto-renew. And if it fails to auto-renew, it'll freeze for a while before it actually deletes. But eventually it will actually delete. And the prices are all very low. And of course, the reason for this is that everything has a cost. And if we don't do that, then we could end up with 1 billion accounts that use up huge amounts of memory and hard drive space and everything else. And we have to take care of that. That's why everybody's going to having rent of some kind. But this is designed to be as easy as possible, where you don't have to think about it. And it's extremely cheap as well.
All right, thanks, Leemon. Mance, moving on to the council, are we still on track to fill all council seats by the end of the year, despite a break from the 1 per month tradition this year so far? I think we've actually announced, I'd have to go back and look, I think it's 5 council members. So we are close to that, but if you can address that.
Yeah, so I was going back when we were reviewing these questions, I was going back and trying to remember if I had said we will be at 39 by the end of this year. Maybe I did at some point, I'm not sure. But what we are seeing is approximately one council member per month. There may be a month where we don't have a council member, and then a different month where we announce two. But on average, we sort of leveled out to about one per month, and I think that's a pretty good rate. And so that, and of course, that would not imply that we would be adding. Where are we? We need 18 more by the end of the year, so 3 per month for the next 6 months. So I don't anticipate that, but I do anticipate a nice steady progression in the coming months at about the progress rate that we've seen this year.
All right, thanks, Mance. Leemon, another hot topic these days is energy consumption of various distributed ledgers. Will the energy consumption of Hedera increase with an increase in the number of nodes over time?
Sure, but here's how it works. The energy that you use per transaction, if you double the number of nodes, it doubles the energy per transaction. But then if you double the number of transactions, the energy per transaction gets cut in half. So if the growth in nodes and the growth in transactions going through us every second continue at the same rate, then it's a wash. And in fact, the transactions are probably growing faster than the nodes are growing. And so then that just means that we're going down. But either way, the energy per transaction is very low. So right now it's 1/5 millionth of Bitcoin. So it could go up a millionfold and it'd still be less than that. So it's a very low carbon footprint, a very low energy usage. You said this is a hot topic. Yes, but the computers are not running very hot. That's a good thing. It's a hot topic, but not very hot for us. But it's important. So the energy consumption will go up as you have more computers, but go down as you have more transactions per second. We are committed to be carbon negative. So we are buying carbon credits for July, starting in July, so that we will have as many carbon credits or more carbon credits than we have energy being used by our network. And we are committing to do that forever. So we're carbon negative. So the best thing you can do is be carbon negative. That's good. The next best thing, and the even better thing you can do, is don't just be carbon negative by buying carbon credits, but actually have a small carbon footprint to begin with. And so we're extremely low in our carbon footprint, even a small fraction of what credit cards are. If you do a transaction on a credit card, it's even less carbon footprint per transaction than that. And so we are doing both of those. We are using a very low amount of energy, which I expect to continue, and we are buying the offsets so that we are carbon negative, not just carbon neutral, but slightly carbon negative for our network. And then there is the third thing, which is, are people building on top of you in ways that encourage the world to be green in various ways? And we have people building carbon credit markets on top of us, and trading of renewable energy on top of us, and even doing the two together where you combine the credit with the energy and you buy the kilowatt hour at the same time you buy the credit. And so it's inherently negative or neutral, whatever you want at the moment you buy it. All this stuff is happening. So we have this whole ecosystem of companies building green things on top of us, and we are green inherently, and we are going carbon negative in buying the offsets to offset what little carbon we do have. So that's where we are.
All right, thanks, Leemon. Mance, I think we'll stick on that topic and we'll combine all these together. So during a June 9th Senate Banking Committee hearing on CBDCs, the director of MIT's Digital Currency Initiative told the senators it is possible to design a CBDC that doesn't consume vast amounts of energy. Can you talk about our technology and also perhaps the competitive landscape around balancing low energy usage as well as the requisite security that a CBDC would need?
Yeah, actually, I think Leemon just did a fantastic job answering that question by and large. The real part of the question, the new part of the question is, how do we compare to the competition? We have not done studies on what the carbon footprint is of the competition. I have seen some some charts on Twitter that do that comparison. I have no idea whether or not they're accurate. What I can say is that we are fantastically green, and it makes sense given the technology that Leemon has invented, that it would be as efficient as it is, and we'd be as green as we are. So we look fantastic from an ESG or a carbon perspective. When I look at how we compare to others, all I can say is what I'm seeing in the press and on Twitter. It looks good to me, but I don't know if it's true. And so I'm not gonna stand up and say that in fact we are the greenest, even though some people say that we are.
All right. Leemon, you've previously mentioned the cost of a transaction is fixed to approximately some very low fractional value of a US penny. However, is this independent of HBAR's value? And if so, how is this done? And does the SDK consider the current price of HBAR against the dollar, or is this something periodically reviewed by the council? And if so, how often?
Cool, lots of questions. So here's how it works. So the price of a transfer of tokens or of HBARs is set in US cents, hundredth of a dollar. And then what you are charged is HBARs according to an exchange rate between HBARs and the dollar. We have computers that go out to the exchanges and find out what is the current price of an HBAR in dollars. We go to several exchanges and then we combine those to get a single exchange rate. And that exchange rate is what gets put onto the network, and it's updated once an hour. So once every hour, the exchange rate between HBARs and dollars gets updated. If it's moving up and down on the market, then you get to pay a constant price. And so that is useful if you're going to build a business on this, do something real on Hedera. You want to be able to predict your costs, and so you can. Now, of course, any store can change the prices of its products, but you want it to happen because the store decided so, and they're only making these changes occasionally. You don't want it to be exposed to the risk of just the market very, very volatilely going up and down fast. And you see that a lot, especially in the crypto market. Things go up and down very fast. You don't want that to affect you. So the price in US dollars is something that the council sets. This is one of the things that the governors govern. And there is committees from the council that end up setting these prices and can change them when needed. The system seems to be working pretty well, though. I think in the last year and a half, none of the prices of any of our services have changed. All that they've ended up having to do is when we add a new service, decide what the price of the new service is. I don't think we've actually ever changed the price of old services, but they can, and they will. And if they decide that it's too high or too low, they can do that. I think I heard someone once ask about, well, what if there's a huge inflation in the US dollar? What if the US economy suddenly has huge inflation? Okay, in the short term, what that does is it's good news. It means that basically your prices are cheaper than they would have been otherwise. You're paying less real value for a transaction on Hedera. Yay, that's good. Now, if you got really huge inflation, then eventually it would hurt Hedera's ability to operate if the prices are really going too low. And so then they would have to adjust the prices. So if they did nothing, it just helps you, and they would do something if it started to actually endanger the network in some way. But I don't see that happening. In the last year and a half, there hasn't been any adjustments to the prices. And so anyone who is built on Hedera has this predictability and has been able to use that. And we've had a lot of people tell us they really appreciate that predictability. Let's see, you asked lots of questions. Were there any that I missed? I think maybe I got them all.
I think you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mance, can you give us more details on how, you sort of alluded to this, but how peer-to-peer electricity markets will operate on Hedera?
Yeah, so P2P electricity markets are a great tokenization use case. And we have a user today, Power Transition, is doing this today through a combination of using HTS, the Hedera token service, and HCS, the Hedera consensus service, allowing consumer homes and electrical charging networks to establish a microgrid. A microgrid is just a local grid that can operate independently of the main grid and create a marketplace between homes and in times of excess and shortage. So the The tokens associated with the energy can be sold to the national grid also during times of excess. And in many countries, electricity coverage is still spotty, and this approach promises to solve challenges of electricity coverage by empowering those communities that use this technology. But I think power transition is a great example of this.
Great, thanks, Mance. Okay, moving on to governance. Leemon, what do you say to people who have expressed concern or distaste for Hedera's perceived centralization based on the large corporations that make up the governing council?
No, this is more decentralized than the governance. Let's talk about governance. So, you can say down with big companies, I don't trust big companies. Guess what? I also do not trust a big company. I do not trust it to do the right thing. You know what else? I also don't trust a stranger that I've never met to do the right thing, who's an individual. I just don't trust anybody. And I think this is the important thing. What do you do in a world where you don't trust anybody? Well, you don't let one somebody control everything. You decentralize it. You have to have a bunch of them. So what I want to do is I want to have this governed by people who are in different countries under different governments, who are on different continents, and that I know who they are, and I know they care about their reputation, and I know that they are hard to bribe because they're a Fortune 500 company, they're one of the top 10 universities in the world. This is what I want, but not just that. I don't just want to be decentralized that way and decentralized in time where they have term limits. What I want is for transparency as well. So I want to know something about the people running something. I want there to be more than one person. I want there to be a lot of them. We have 21 council members right now on every continent on the globe except Antarctica. Maybe we'll even get that. We have diverse interests among our council members. If you were to pick just one council member, do I trust them? No, I don't trust any stranger, but I know who they are. I know they've been around for a while. They're probably not going to do incredibly stupid things. They're probably going to act in their own interest, which is why I don't trust them. If I meet some random stranger, well, I don't trust them either. What I would like is to be able to see how they do their deliberations. And so what we do is we publish all the minutes of all the meetings of the council. And so you can see who are the council members from all around the world with different interests. They're in different industries, they're different backgrounds. There's companies and schools, universities, different kinds of things, but you know who they are. You can read the minutes, you can see how they're discussing it. What I would feel a lot less comfortable with is if a dozen guys in China controlled all the hashing power and made the real decisions. Or if everyone holding a coin has one vote and the whales, who I don't even know who they are, who hold all the coins and pull the strings from behind the scenes, are controlling it. I would be very uneasy with that because I don't get minutes from every time they meet and discuss these things. And I don't know who they are, and they don't necessarily have a reputation that they're really interested in protecting. If you give them $1 million, maybe they're willing to lose their reputation. This is not as good decentralized governance. It's really centralization. You can say, hey, anyone on earth can contribute to our code base. But what ends up happening over time for most systems is that you end up with a handful of people with the power. This is every system ends up that way, or one person with the power. Every system ends up with that. So what you do is you say, we want checks and balances. We want this group that is controlling it to be a group that is known, that is decentralized, meaning around the world under different governments, in case governments try to intervene, that are publishing their minutes of what they're doing, that are big enough that it's hard to bribe them. This is what you want for true transparency of governance. And I think this is incredibly important, and you've got to bake it in at the ground level when you first build your system. It becomes very hard to retroactively add good governance like this, trustworthy governance. That's what's important.
So before we move on, Leemon, I'm going to ask you to comment just a little bit further, making the point that anonymity is incompatible with transparency, especially when it comes to governance tokens.
Yeah, so those two words are opposites. Transparency means being able to see, and anonymity means not being able to see them. But it's important. You want anonymity in the things you do in your private life. But if something that is valuable and important and has a lot of power is being governed by people, I don't want anonymity by the governors. We want transparency for the governors. I live in a country where the political system is, we know who runs it. It isn't a king making decisions in a private chamber. It isn't even a small cabal of people that I don't know who they are that are doing it. It's these officials that we know who they are, and that they act, three branches of government act as checks and balances on each other. And you can go to C-SPAN and watch them debating. And this is important. And it's still a bad system, but it's better than any other system I can think of. And people have said, democracy is the worst form of government, other than all the others. That's a joke that people have made. Something similar goes on here. I'd like to have, perfect human beings that I can trust, and everybody who runs this thing is 100% trustworthy. But in the real world, the best you can do is good checks and balances with transparency. I kept talking about the reputation mattering. Well, that wouldn't matter if you didn't have transparency, but with transparency, then it does matter. They couldn't raise the price of a transaction without you knowing they did it. That's what we're talking about. And they care about their reputations, and there's total transparency on what's going on. This is critical.
Yeah, and I'll just make the further point that if there are governance tokens that are being used in the governance model of any given platform, and the more governance tokens you hold, the more weight your vote has, and anonymous people can buy governance tokens, then it is impossible to prevent consolidation of those tokens into the hands of a few, because even if limits were put on to any individual and how many governance tokens they can buy, you can anonymously buy tokens. You can consolidate, one person can anonymously go buy as many governance tokens as they can afford, and you just can't control the consolidation of the power. And so anonymity in that sense is counter to both being decentralized and as well as providing transparency into who's actually governing the platform.
True. You wouldn't want to be governed by the whales, especially if you don't know who the whales are and they don't publish anything about what they're doing and there's no transparency. Yeah. No. So I think it is very important that you have a transparent and trustworthy governance system. And do I trust any of our council members? Do I trust any human being on earth? Well, no, but I trust them to keep tabs on each other and to have checks and balances on each other. And that's where you build trust.
All right. So on that topic, Mance, do council members purchase HBARs on exchanges? Is there a separate supply agreement upon joining? And then related to that, why do governing council nodes stake such a small amount of HBAR?
Yeah. So for the first question, there is no separate supply agreement. There's no special deal for the council members in the way that they get tokens. They get tokens like anybody in the market would get tokens. Now, does that mean that we wouldn't work with them in the same way that maybe we work with other companies? For example, we've had programs in the past where we've given tokens out to developers so that they can sort of bootstrap their project and use the network at low cost because we've given them some HBAR, that sort of thing. But in a general sense, everyone has to ultimately buy HBAR to use the network, and the council members are no different than anyone else in that regard. There's no special contract that they have that the general public doesn't have. So that's the answer to part one. For the second question, why do their accounts look like they have such a small number of HBAR? Really, I think this question goes to the heart of, well, I interpret it to mean, is the weight of their vote really that much, right? You have the network that exists, and each council member is responsible for running a node in the network, and the transactions that are being ordered by that network are weighted by the weight of the tokens that they represent. We proxy stake treasury to those nodes, and the proxy staking of treasury to those nodes does not mean that we're actually taking treasury tokens out of the treasury account and placing them into the accounts of the different council members. That's not how proxy staking works. So you wouldn't see this if you were just to look at their accounts, but it is the case that they're voting their pro rata weight of treasury when they vote on the order of transactions, their nodes. So they, don't look at their accounts and assume that the weight of their vote has no effect. It's just misleading in that sense, but that's how it works.
All right, thanks for explaining that, Mance. Leemon, using HCS, can you verify the identity of an organization? For example, if someone created a website to post job postings, could HCS verify who the company is to reduce fraud, impersonation, and those kinds of challenges?
Sure. So the way HCS works is that you create a topic on Hedera, and then people send messages that flow through that topic. Hedera puts them in order, gives them timestamps, and you can see all the messages that flowed through that topic. If you want, when you create the topic, you can give it a public key, and then anybody submitting to it has to sign it by that public key. And so you could have an organization that says, I'm going to have a topic for me, and if you want to apply for a job here, we're going to be sending things through there, and you know that it came from us because we've digitally signed it. Or it could be a very complex key. It could say any of these 10 organizations can do it, or you can even say any 3 of these 10 must agree and sign it. And so you can have validator networks and things where you have sets of people for a bridge, say, and most of them have to agree to make the message go through it. So we have that built in to the system itself. You can do any kinds of signatures you want to ensure that when you see a message going through that topic, you know that message has been properly signed when it was submitted, that the proper signatures were there. Now, if you want a system that goes beyond that, you can have the message itself have some signatures on it. So you can prove that a message is valid because there's signatures on it, or it's been approved by someone because it has some signatures on it. That also then gives you complete control of that. But then you want to go one layer beyond that, and you say, great, we have these signatures on the subject and on the topic itself, and we have the signatures on the messages flowing through it, but how do I know what public keys to use to check these signatures? That's identity. So you do that, and there's lots of identity systems out there. Some are based on DIDs. There's these data objects that represent somebody, and you can use those to say, this public key truly is John Smith's public key. You can get certificate authorities to sign that. And there's even ways of using DIDs with identity systems with an anonymity, where you can prove that you don't know who I am, but you can know that I'm a person who ought to be able to approve this thing. The whole spectrum of things can be built on us. And we support the whole spectrum of things, and people are building identity stuff on top of us. You can use that. People use digital signatures, and we support that at both layers that I talked about. And so in every way you want to, you can design your system to have trust by using these mechanisms.
All right. Mance, we've talked a little bit about governing council members in HBAR. Now, can you explain for businesses, companies, developers who have use cases and are building on top of Hedera, how do they buy HBAR to fuel the transactions? Are they allowed to buy OTC from exchanges? How do they have to do it via the normal exchange process like any other buyer?
So a couple of points. One, we may not even know, and often don't know, who the organizations are that are building on top of us. In other words, if a company or a business wants to use the platform, they don't have to talk to us. And often they don't. And so it's not as though there is a contractual relationship between us and a business that somehow enables us to put constraints on them in any way, especially with respect to how they decide to get HBAR from the market. We don't have those conversations, number one. And even with those companies that we do talk to, for whatever reason, and there are a lot of reasons why we might, right? I mean, there are organizations that come to us and want explanation on how to use the platform, want help in identifying a system integrator to help do the work, and on and on and on. Maybe they just want to work with us because they see that there are opportunities to for us to put them in touch with other organizations in our ecosystem. That's part of the value, is that we are an ecosystem and we can help create connections across parties and that sort of thing. But when those conversations happen, it's never the case, never, that we say, oh, by the way, you can only get HBAR, through method X, Y, or Z, and not this other approach. Those conversations never happen. And so if an organization decides that they want to buy HBAR and they want to do it through an OTC trade, they can do that. If they want to buy it spot off the exchange, they can do that. We just have zero influence or real motivation, frankly, to try to insert ourselves into that process. We don't want to be in that position, right? That's not our decision. That's a decision for the users of the platform.
Got it. Thanks, Mance. Leemon, staying on the topic of exchanges, how does Hedera mitigate a 1/3 attack on the network with exchanges holding large amounts of HBAR? For example, it appears some accounts have a significant percentage of the circulating supply.
Oh, yeah. So first of all, it's not circulating supply, it's total supply that matters. Right now, less than 18% of all the coins are circulating. So it doesn't matter. If somebody could hold all of them, they only have 18% of our supply, less than that. But in the long term, when we have released all the coins and all the coins are circulating, then an attack could happen when you have 1/3. And when we get to that point, I expect this whole industry will be far more mature than it is right now. In the long term, I would not expect most people to be having all of their coins being held by somebody else. I would expect you to have your own account. And there are ways of doing decentralized key recovery, sort of decentralized custody that people can do. I think in the long term, you're going to want to own your own coins, not have some custodian, some exchange holding all your coins for you. And you're going to want then to have distributed consensus on, or distributed ways of protecting yourself from losing your password. And there's ways of doing all of that. As our market matures, I think we're going to do more and more of that. You would say most of the stock in this country is not held by stockbrokers. Most of the pork belly futures in this country are not held by the people trading them. They're held by investors, or they're held by consumers. They're not held by the people doing the trading. So right at the moment, yes, the exchanges are holding all the coins for a lot of the cryptocurrencies, but that will change as this market grows up. As this market grows up, people will hold their own coins, and also they will be using lots of other people to hold their coins. Maybe use your bank to hold your coins. Maybe use someone else. But what we will see is less centralization as time goes on. And again, for security, it doesn't matter at all until we've released all the coins and gone to non-permissioned nodes. Until that point, it doesn't affect security at all. So I think that we're in an immature market, and we're going to see the market grow up, and people will stop having the exchange hold all their coins. The exchanges will just have enough to have liquidity.
All right. Thanks, Leemon. Mance, when will the next governing council meeting minutes be published?
Yeah, within 30 days of being approved. So we have a council meeting, and then after the council meeting, the minutes are all typed up, and then they're circulated prior to the next council meeting to the council. The council at the next council meeting, it's not obligated to, but almost always does approve those minutes in that next council meeting. And then within 30 days of that approval, the minutes get published. I think we're up to date today, which means that, and we have a council meeting coming up in July. I forget exactly when, maybe the second week of July, something like that, which means that the next batch of minutes will be published likely within 30 days of that point. And that's how it works. So 30 days post approval, and approval happens the council meeting subsequent to when the meeting minutes were captured in the first place.
All right. Thanks for walking us through that, Mance. Leemon, if different blockchain projects can be linked, what does that do to competition in the market?
It's great. It's not a zero-sum game. It makes the market as a whole grow, which is good for all the competitors. Yes, competitors care about what share of the pie they have, but the important thing is that the pie gets bigger. So think of the internet. There was actually a movement at one point to have lots of little networks. And there were actually networks that were sort of like a little internet with its own email system and its own like web pages that several companies built. And they finally realized, no, it is actually better for us to allow interoperability with everybody else. And so then the World Wide Web and our normal email system and everything that we see from the internet takes over, and everyone grew as a result. It was a good thing for everybody. Same thing with ledgers. These blockchains, these distributed ledger technologies, each of them can run smart contracts and have tokens. But what really makes it more valuable is when all of them can share their tokens with each other, and all of them can have smart contracts that see what's going on in each other. So ultimately what will happen is that we'll have connections between all of the ledgers. And does that help competitors? Of course it does. It helps everybody. Rising tide will raise all the boats. So this is what we want to do. It is important to have this. This is why we put a lot of effort into having bridges between us and other people. And it's why we have this consensus system that itself acts sort of like a bridge, and you can build bridges using it to other systems. But I think it's very important to have bridges between ledgers, interoperability between ledgers. From day one, we allowed you to take a contract that runs, a smart contract that runs on Ethereum and just run it on us, basically unmodified. That was a kind of interoperability, and even stronger forms of interoperability is what we're working on right now. But I think this is important for the whole market, and I think the whole market understands it, that we're all better off if we can all talk to each other.
Thanks, Leemon. Agreed. Not a zero-sum game. Okay, Mance, as we think about the long term, we have talked a lot about Hedera being a 100-year company. We have a question about the coin release schedule, and it appears that this element of decentralization is to be carried out within significantly less time than 100 years. Can you walk us through the logic there?
Well, so what is published on even the latest version of the coin economics paper shows our legal obligations for releasing coins. And what you'll, and by the way, there is an update being created to that coin economics paper. It's it's in the final stages, and there'll be an update coming, so stay tuned for that. But even with the version that's out there today, what you see is that there's, I don't know the exact number, approximately 40%, and I know that number is wrong, but just for argument's sake, approximately 40% of the tokens are legally obligated to be released over some schedule, which is outlined in that coin economics paper. And then the remaining coins that aren't legally obligated, there is no schedule for. Right? It's not the case that there's a schedule that says those coins are going to be released by a certain point in time. That remains up to the council to determine what the timing is and under what conditions. And there will be a lot of variables that go into that decision process about how to release coins over time, and how, what to use those coins for, and, just a whole array of decision points that are involved in that sort of process. So yes, it's likely that all the coins will be in circulating supply, much sooner than 100 years from now. But even if they are, it's kind of irrelevant, right? Because there's still coins that are flowing into the treasury all the time. Right? With every API call, there are coins flowing back into treasury, and that's by design, right? That is the economy. And so, we haven't said what the rate or the projection is for when all the coins will be in circulating supply, because honestly, we don't know what that date is. And, and what you see in the coin economics paper is what we understand today. And again, there'll be an update to that shortly.
All right.
Leemon, do you have any other comments on that?
No, that's true. So the goal is not for us to hold the coins forever. They will go out. I talked about when they go out, they will have a lot more security. you know, because it'll be, I think, more widely spread. It won't just be a few whales holding all the coins, but we will see, and we will know that before we do anything that would be risky. And so we will always ensure that there's safety. As for the date, who knows? So we'll see what happens.
All right, Leemon, again, as we think about the future, you know, when we think about our global governing council at scale, 39 members, and we think about potential conflicts emerging between, you know, governance and that body and centralized interests, for example, that of a nation state or regulation on national interests. Can you share any thoughts that you have on that?
Yeah. So I think the world is moving towards actually accepting ledgers, blockchains, distributed ledger technology. The world governments are saying, okay, most governments are saying, okay, this is good, we're going to accept it. This is good, because if a government ever decides we hate all blockchain, all distributed ledger technology, ledgers are evil, we want to make it illegal, then there is no way that either nodes or governors can be in that country. And so the nodes have to leave the country and the governors have to leave the country. And so what you want is you want your ledger to have nodes in every country, on every continent, so that no one government can shut it down. And you want your governors to be spread across continents in different countries, so that no one government can shut them all down. And that's what we've done. That's what we've done with our governance. Our governors are headquartered in different countries on different continents around the globe. And with our nodes, they're also spread. And so this, I think, is important. And every ledger deals with this. You could not run illegally in a country without the authorities knowing it. You could have a wallet, you could have an account if you're a citizen of a country that's made it illegal, but you couldn't run a node because all the nodes have to gossip with each other. So they all have to know the IP addresses of each other. So that node could never be hidden from the government. So there's just no way, if a government wants to shut down ledgers in their country, they will be able to do it. They will be able to stop all the nodes in that country, and they could stop anyone who's a governor from publicly headquartering in that country from being a governor. So we're decentralized. And heaven forbid, if any country ever does shut us down or shut down ledgers in general, or ours in particular, then we just want to make sure that we have some nodes and some governors outside that country. And that's why we've decentralized our governors and we've decentralized our nodes for that reason.
All right. Thanks, Leemon. Okay, I'm going to ask a series of questions. This might be the speed round part of the town hall, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some fun at the end. Mance, will transaction fees always be the sole source of revenue for Hedera?
I have no compelling reason today to look for an alternative source of revenue. let me just say, the model has been from the beginning to fund the network and the activities of the network through transaction revenue. And I am very optimistic that we're going to be able to do exactly that. And there's not going to be a problem. There's not going to be a need for looking for other sources of revenue. So I would say no. If I had to say yes or no today, I would say no. There will be no other sources of revenue outside of transaction fees.
All right.
And make sure you buy lots of t-shirts. We'll get all our revenue from selling t-shirts. Buy t-shirts.
Swag.
Yeah.
I will say I'm seeing some amazing community swag as well. So I think we've got some good competition there, and I love it.
Oh, I love that competition. Have you seen some of the stuff the community is making? Beautiful t-shirts and other things. I love it. Metal coins, it's really cool. People are making some really cool things.
Amazing. Yeah. So creative. Mance, who's in charge of exchange partnerships for Hedera?
You know, this, I was not going to announce this until just before this call, and she's not even started yet, but Elaine Song is joining us, and there'll be a formal announcement shortly, and she will be responsible for all on-ramp activities. And she, you know, as part of the BD team, BD has been responsible for all of those activities. Now Elaine is going to have uniquely primary responsibility for that, and we're just delighted to have her joining the organization.
Absolutely. Leemon, did scheduled transactions come about from the HIP process? This is from someone who is a fan of scheduled transactions.
It's funny. When I first started the company, I had several ideas for services we could do someday. And at the very first council meeting, I said, council, it is your job to decide what features to add. Oh, and here's several features that you might want to add someday. And one of them that I mentioned was scheduled transactions, because I think it's kind of cool. And so we had that as something that we might add someday, but it wasn't until we felt a real need. We had a system where one of the projects we were working on really had a need for the scheduled transactions that then the council and their committees agreed, okay, let's go ahead and pull the trigger and do it. But then we didn't just do it, we made a HIP, and the community then had the inputs into what scheduled transactions would actually look like and how they would work. And so we used the HIP process to make them be the thing the community really wants. And it got better as a result of doing the HIP on it. It wasn't all our ideas, it was the community's ideas. And so now what we have is this ability for the ledger itself to collect multiple signatures when you need a multi-sig. You don't have to talk to each other, you can just all talk to the ledger. And it will come to the point where scheduled transactions are actually scheduled. We haven't turned that on yet, where you can have it happen in the future. And you say, well, if everybody signs by this date, it'll happen on that date. Or it'll happen as soon as we get all the signatures. Not a half-hour limit, but a year's limit. This is coming. You'll even be able to imagine someday things like a smart contract can create a scheduled transaction to call that same smart contract a month later. And now it's alive. It runs itself once a month. Anyway, all sorts of things like that are just cool concepts for scheduled transactions. We have it right now where it collects the signatures from a group of people over a half hour. We will be rolling out the feature where it can happen at a certain date in the future. And who knows about that last feature I mentioned? We may add that someday too. But it's a fun thing. And I really appreciate the community for making it better. That's what the HIP process did.
I love that story. That's fantastic. Mance, today, could Hedera manage the volume of transactions like we see with Visa or MasterCard?
If the numbers that I've read are accurate, the answer is yes. So I've seen numbers that suggest that on average, Visa or MasterCard process somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 TPS. We could absolutely manage that today if those numbers are accurate, yes.
All right. Leemon, what can you tell us about the crypto conditions you put on the system?
Crypto conditions. I'm guessing you mean cryptography as opposed to cryptocurrency. So cryptography, I used to teach cryptography in college. Cryptography is fascinating. We have held ourselves to an unusually high standard. So all of the things internal to our network for getting consensus and with our mirror nodes, being able to know for sure that things are real, we have followed the CNSA standard. This is the standard that the US government uses to protect its own top secret information. And so that's why all of our hashes are 384 bits, not 256. Why the more bits? Because it is required to meet the level of the CNSA standard. It's why we use RSA, we use ECDSA. We internally aren't even using ED 25519 because it's not part of the CNSA standard. For our external facing things, we do allow people to use ED 25519, which is basically the industry standard. Everyone uses that, and we use it too. And it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. And maybe someday it'll be part of the CNSA standard as well. But at the moment, they haven't gotten around to adding it to the standard. And so for all of the internal consensus, the encryption in the links between the computers, all of that is CNSA compliant. We use the highest levels of cryptography, even though we're using slower systems and more bits than everyone else is using. We're doing it to reach that certification level, that level of security.
All right. Mance, for those who may have great ideas for developing on Hedera, but potentially not the tech talent, where would you refer them?
Come talk to us. So let me explain how we go to market. When we learn of a project, say an enterprise project, for example, we are sometimes asked to help. We bring in system integrators and we work with that system integrator and the enterprise or the small, medium business. And through the process, the system integrators become familiar with the platform and develop expertise on the platform. And then they turn around and build their practices on the platform, meaning that they turn around and they go and look and source their own projects independently of us. Nigel Clark, big shout out to Nigel and also Alex Godwin, have been developing this SI channel for us. And this year it's just gone fantastically well. We have dozens of system integrators that are now onboarded and have worked with us. And we have high confidence on a large number and an increasing number of SIs that can develop on the platform. And the process I just described is working. Those same SIs are now bringing to us their own projects without our involvement at all. And all of that is primarily due to the efforts of Nigel and Alex. So kudos to those guys. But the point here is that we have a very active, very strong SI partner channel. And if you have a project and want to pursue it, we know the folks to hook you up with. So you just need to connect with us and we can make that happen.
All right. Leemon, do you plan to implement full coverage of the Token Taxonomy Framework over time?
So we have been very much trying to look at the standards that are out there and add more and more of them over time. This is absolutely what we're doing. So we have that framework that we're looking at. We are actually active with the Interwork Alliance, IWA, which does a token taxonomy. And we are engaged. We're one of the people working on building that taxonomy. And of course, we want to support it as well. We have a HIP for doing NFTs in a way that is closer to what these are saying. It incorporates a lot of those features into NFTs in our system. So yes, we are very much all about the standards for tokens. I think that benefits everyone if we follow standards, and bringing in more and more of those to us and more of that power to us. And we will continue to use the HIP process to also bring in input from the community. But we are influenced both by these standards and by the community, and we're trying to reach a full set of everything in those ways.
All right. And Mance, does Hedera provide enterprise level solutions for NFTs?
Yes, go check out Toco by DLA Piper. Scott Teal is the head of that project. Just go to our website or Google it, Toco, DLA, Hedera, you'll find it. It's an exceptional platform, and they have gone to market now, I don't know, 6 or 9 months ago.
Yep, and also a council member. Okay, we're going to wrap up here with just a couple of fun questions. Before we do that, I just wanted to add, we had a ton of technical questions this go around. So we know they are all important. There were a number that we wanted to address. So we're going to try something new. Next week, Leemon and I will be on our first Twitter Spaces, and Leemon will address a number of these that we didn't get to today. And hopefully that gives us a little bit more time to share with the community some of those fantastic questions and the answers to those, because there were just so many. We never get through enough in an hour, but we want to try to give access and answers wherever we can. Okay, so as we wrap up, Leemon, have you read the work of Douglas Hofstadter? And if so, did it play any role in the inception of meta gossip?
I love Gödel Escherbach. So Gödel Escherbach was his book that got a Pulitzer Prize. I read that when I was in college. He talks about strange loops and recursion and self-referential things, and talks about how that relates to Gödel's incompleteness theorem and how it relates to the halting problem, and just lots of fun stuff. If you like a fun book, easy read that has some really cool concepts, I would encourage that book. It did not play a role in Gossip About Gossip, but you know, who knows? Everything squished into my subconscious might have had some impact, so who knows what happened.
Maybe somehow, some way. Okay, and then last question for both of you. Who are your mathematics heroes, and what are your favorite math equations?
Look, I'll go first. I don't know if I have a math equation, and I have a serious sense of deja vu here. Did we talk about this last time? It's Feynman, and surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman. That's the book that immediately comes to mind, and it has not as much to do with the math, but as it does his personality, which really comes through in the book. And I don't have a favorite equation. This is actually, if I had to choose an equation, I would say the Bellman equation, because of the foundational work that, its importance to the work that Leemon and I were doing 25 years ago in the field of reinforcement learning. I don't know. So I'll throw that out there. Leemon?
Yeah, it sounds like deja vu because we did talk about it. We didn't have time last time, and I told you that Bellman equation was my favorite. So Mance stole my favorite, but that's okay.
I didn't remember that. Did you really tell me that?
I really did tell you that, yeah. So it's okay. I like it too. And I'll also steal your Feynman. I like Feynman. And Conway does really cool stuff, or did. Turing is really neat math. So I like those guys. But let me tell you what the Bellman equation is. It's how you make computers learn how to be really smart all by themselves, like become the best Go player in the world, the best chess player, the best player at League of Legends, of all sorts of video games and things. And all it says is that you do it by giving the computer a sense of happiness. It's actually very much like how emotions work in animals and humans, is what the computer is doing. And it just says, if something good happens to you that you weren't expecting, be happier. And if you do something and it puts you into a state where you think the world is you become happier, then you should be happier in that earlier state. That's it. So if I get happier 1 second from now than I am right now for no reason, then I should have been happier now. And if something good happens to me, I should be happier. That's what the Bellman equation says. And it's so short, you can put it on a postcard, and yet it lets these computers learn how to make a robot walk and learn how to be the best player of a game. And maybe in some sense, they're growing in intelligence in the way we do it, driven by emotions through the Bellman equation. That's what I like.
Leemon, would you say the Bellman equation is the computer equivalent of fake it until you make it?
I wouldn't say that. You shouldn't be unreasonably happy. It's just your expectations of the future right now should match what it will be in a second. And then when the future happens, you should adjust your expectations accordingly. Learn from your mistakes.
All right. We are over time for today. We will share on our Twitter account the information for next week's Twitter Spaces session. We hope you will join us there, and we will also see you here next month. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.